So, hi everyone. We're really pleased to welcome everyone today, whatever time zone you're in. It's great to have so many people join us representing an international Zoom room here. So, thank you for being here. For those of you who don't know, my name is Fiona Crisp. I'm Professor of Contemporary Art at Northumbria University in the UK. And I'm co-founder of the Cultural Negotiation of Science group. And the group's been going for 12 years now, and I co-lead it with my friend and colleague and fellow artist, Christine Borland. So the Cultural Negotiation of Science, we call it CNoS for short because it's a bit of a mouthful. So CNoS is hosting this event today, Artist as Agent. We're going to explore some of the really interesting but sometimes contentious aspects of how artists and critical art practice have infiltrated space science and technology. So we've got three fantastic speakers with us in the virtual room. So we've got Anna Sitnikova, who's based in the Netherlands and is co-director of the Moon Gallery. We've got Nahum, director of the Cosmica Institute, who's based in Berlin and Mexico City, but is in Lithuania today, joining us from there. And we've also got Luis Guzman, who's an artist, curator, and director, and he wears multiple hats. And I will introduce them all when you speak, Luis. But for now, I'll say that it's Luis that has invited Anna and Nahum here today, and so he's the kind of golden thread linking us all together. So we're going to hear from all three speakers via presentations lasting about 15 minutes. And then we'll have a period of exchange in response to those presentations between Anna and Nahum and Luis. And then we'll open up to questions in the room. So I'm going to introduce Dawn Knox here today. So Dawn is an artist and a curator and also a PhD candidate at Northumbria. And she's going to be facilitating the room and looking after the chat. So Dawn's just going to say a few words.
Hello, welcome everyone. So my role will be to support you. If you're having any problems with Zoom, feel free to message me directly. And I'll just talk through a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. So when you've come in, you'll probably see all of us. If you want to see just the speaker, go up to your right-hand corner and there's view, and you can put it on speaker view or multiple speaker view, which will show the last few people speaking. You're also welcome to look at all of us, but sometimes it's nicer just to see the face of who's speaking. Everyone's welcome to keep their camera on or off. We will be recording, so if your camera's on, you may be recorded visually. But that is completely your choice. It's nice to see everyone here together. And then when we get to the questions section, I'll be facilitating, supporting that. So when you come to a question, you may either write it in the chat and then I can invite you to read it yourself or read it on your behalf, or you're very welcome to digitally raise your hand and we'll call you into the conversation. The way you digitally raise your hand is you go down to the reaction button where there's the heart, you push that, and you'll see just up the second button up is raise hand. And I'll do my best to make sure we have all of your hands raised in order so I can call you into the conversation. So I think that's it for me. I'll be talking to you again later when we're bringing in the conversations and the questions, but feel free to message me directly if you have any questions about technical aspects. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. And of course, if people want to share observations, etc., in the chat as we go along, that's a really nice way of participation in the community here. So we, of course, within that ask that everybody is considerate of the views of others, even in disagreement, and that all exchanges are respectful. This should be an open but safe room within which to share perspectives and insights. but also acknowledging that the kind of the space of space is contentious, and it does raise strong feelings. And as Dawn says, we are recording, so you're aware of that. Okay, so before we crack on, I just want to say a few words about CNoS, Cultural Negotiation of Science, as many people in the room won't know about the group. So it brings together artists, academics, and research students who engage with expert cultures across a really broad spectrum of science and technology, including biomedical and environmental science, as well as fundamental science, which is, of course, includes space, science, and technology. So the work being undertaken across these fields is kind of at the forefront of interdisciplinary practice, and each artist researcher is developing extensive national and international networks within their kind of bespoke area of concern. But the collective work of CNoS allows us to kind of bring together that wealth of experience, which can sometimes be really lonely, kind of working out with different kind of groups of scientists, because sometimes, as we know, that can be not particularly welcome. So it sort of brings together that knowledge, and it allows us to focus on things like method and advocacy. So the negotiations of the group, I would say that they kind of consider the creative, the critical, and the ethical dimensions of what it is to work within the scientific realm as a distinct contemporary and critical art practice, but also as a political act. So within this, there's an absolute resistance to the instrumentalization of art by science, which comes from the asymmetrical power structures that still very much persist today. And that kind of resistance takes the form of methods that constructively disrupt and disturb habituated cultures of practice within different expert fields to try and create more kind of permeable structures, not just between the arts and sciences, but also in relation to civic agency. So in this respect, the working method of CNoS is not premised on making science more legible for publics. Rather, it's about connecting people so that they care and understand what their impacts are in relation to science, and what their agency is in relation to the decisions taken about what science gets done. So the idea of agency as a demand and as a necessity for both artists and publics is a really important idea, especially in relation to these asymmetries of power structures. And I guess there's no greater asymmetry at present than that between publics and the new space industries. So what's the relationship between agency, which of course is the power to intervene and to produce an effect on the one hand, and the idea of artist as agent, as the producer of effect on the other hand? And what happens when that effect must be brought about by a process of infiltration, of moving inside a system? So does that system recognize, welcome, reject, ignore the agent? Does it even understand that the infiltration has taken place? So I think these are kind of some of the questions that we want to kind of move around and play with today. Great. So I'm going to invite Nahum to be our first speaker. So while Nahum's sharing his screen and getting his slides up, I'm just going to introduce him. So Nahum is an artist and musician. His work crafts unconventional perspectives and narratives to evoke wonder and deepen our understanding of cosmic existence. In his oeuvre, Nahum orchestrates a diverse array of media, including performance, installation, video, music, painting, and storytelling. He frequently incorporates space technologies, illusionism, and hypnosis to transport audiences on otherworldly journeys that spark critical dialogues about existencehood. So in 2011, Nahum founded the Cosmic Institute, a space organization with a mission to create a platform for critical, cultural, and poetic discourse about our relationship to the universe, space activities, and their impact on Earth. And the Institute develops initiatives that bridge the arts and humanities, the space sector, and broader society. And his work's been exhibited across the USA, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Germany, UK, France, Sweden, Russia, Australia, Taiwan, China, Japan, and Brazil. So pretty comprehensively. Okay, no.
Well, thanks so much for that introduction, Fiona. And thank you to all of you for being here. Again, it's lovely to see many of the familiar faces. And just to get a sense of the room, would you be able to type in the chat the city and the country where you are like dialing in? It will help us to get a sense of where we are around the globe. I'm sure that some must be like really like in that direction from where I am, or there, or in the diagonal. So, and those that know me, they know that I like doing this because what I do is like in my mind, I start like building like um a map with all these points in my head, and like Mexico City, ay, qué bueno que están aquí. Scotland, I know that Fabi is in Brazil, India. So this is wonderful, no? And I would like to start with a very simple idea, and that is all space and art, or space and art, is ancestral, and it started with our ancestors in all of our indigenous cultures. Personally, I come from a culture that had a very intimate dialogue with the stars. No, my ancestors built cities that were speaking to the cosmos, where they had pyramids that in every equinox, a spectacle of shadows would create a serpent descending. And then, like a really fast forward in time, through all these cultures, like in all these points in the world that you are like mentioning in the chat, all of your cultures were deeply rooted in the stars. And this tradition has been kept by artists worldwide. And I, again, those who know me, they know that I love to highlight this sentence, and that is artists and all around the world were already imagining our connection with the stars and space travel even before science, technology, and millionaires were able to even dream about these journeys. What I want to say is that today, in this session, we are here to discuss what it means an artist as an agent, as someone that is infiltrating the space sector. So from my perspective and my understanding, the work that we are doing is nothing more. It's not about doing something new. It's not about artists doing these like new collaborations with space agencies and space industry, but it's more about reclaiming that these visions and these narratives and the stories, they originated with us. And today, where there are some hegemonic powers and capitals and military as well, that have taken, like that have created a monopoly of space activities. I see it almost as my duty, or and perhaps even the duty of this community to 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 reclaim, our place in this journey throughout the stars. So I am going to start with just sharing my screen, and sharing with you some of the projects I've done. As Fiona mentioned, pretty much all of my personal story began with Cosmica Institute, which was a direct response to my early work in the International Astronautical Federation, which is the big federation of all the space industry, agencies, space professionals. And since my early beginnings in the Space Federation, I was already feeling very frustrated with the pace of the activities that were happening there, but also of the reach of this work. So, in response, I created Cosmica, which is a space organization dedicated to all things space culture, art, and humanities. Originally, we started in London, like doing large scale events, and then eventually in Mexico, we were doing festivals. And slowly we transitioned into other things like education. No, we worked with the International Space University to create like a humanities program, and just to think what are the humanities that a future space expert or astronaut need to know. And I have to say that throughout time, um, my views, and also as I got to know more of the space community, my views on what was happening in this official space community started to become uh, more and more critical. Critical in the sense that I was asking more questions. And as many of you, I'm an artist, and we all know the conversations that we have in the arts about these typical buzzwords, no, like feminisms, decolonial, ancestral wisdom, and so on and so on. So at some point, my job became pretty simple, which was to add the word space before these topics that are important in our arts community, and that alone was a very subversive act, and still it is. Just a couple of days ago, I had a very difficult conversation with the main space organization in the planet, and I was threatened with a confidentiality clause. But what I can say is that there's a lot to be done to fix the toxic cultures that are happening in the space sector, because space activities are not only about technology and science, they are also about a culture, and and these are political acts. Space organizations um, think, or they like to say that the work is non-political, but if we're talking about building new worlds, how is that not going to be a political act? So my job and the job of many of you is exactly to infiltrate. Yes, the rooms, the conference rooms, the conferences, the space agencies, but also the narratives, so we can challenge them, question them, and hopefully build cultures that have the capacity to to ask themselves constantly what we are doing and how we are doing things, because we know that cultures that don't question themselves, they become toxic over time, as it has happened with a lot of human cultures around the world. Um, Eventually, many of you know this project, Matters of Gravity, which was another attempt for infiltrating space technologies. So after 2 years of negotiations and very strange negotiations, we can go into this later. I was able to have access to the big cargo plane that is used for training cosmonauts in Star City outside of Moscow. And we were able to do some really wild projects in this project called Matters of Gravity. We had glass structures in zero gravity in the plane. We had glitter, we had water, we had all those things that normally zero G flights would never allow you to do. But eventually, like the fact that we were able to do this project in such circumstances was a genuine way of finding all the back doors that would allow us to do this. And 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 also this is part of how we operate as artists. Eventually, at some point, I wasn't allowed to use the
Você sabe
airplane.
onde é a feira agroecológica?
Sorry, Fabi,
Ela é perto do rio, do
I don't
lado do
know.
rio.
I
Feira
think
agroecológica.
I think Fabi, I don't know. So yeah, what I wanted to say is that this is what we do, and to find these back doors, the cracks through the doors, and try to do work. Because what is certain is that almost no one is waiting for an artist, to all of a sudden arrive and start working. It's us who have to, like first knock the door and then realize that the doors are very, very closed for us, and then go around and then find allies inside the organizations, and then start like working from the inside, which makes it even like more interesting, no? Because you become like a hacker. And 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 also something that I've been doing in my previous works is hijacking in a different way, and that has to do with working directly with the minds of people and audiences through something called hypnosis. I found that in order to divert to raise awareness of the different approaches that we can personally have to the cosmos, I could do something like planting a false experience in people's minds, and in the moment where I am like injecting, like hacking the memory system of people in an audience, I start seeing sometimes in a very physical way how they engage with the cosmos and with this impossible experience. You can see in this image how a guy is like raising his arms. He is experiencing moon gravity. No, so people start like creating these experiences in their minds, and also I find that is a very interesting way of uh, infiltrating not only space agencies but also the individual imaginaries of 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 people, just like that. So I am not following how much time I am talking, but yeah, I guess that throughout the talk we will be able to go deeper into the different mechanisms and strategies that we have used to infiltrate the space community, the challenges, but also the ethical issues in doing so. So having said that,
You've spoken
uh,
for, you've spoken for 10 minutes, Nahum. You could
okay,
put a
fantastic.
little bit longer. So
Okay,
please.
so I'm done. I think I'm done, Fiona.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Mhm.
Thanks, Nahum. That was wonderful, as always. Great. Okay. So we're going to go through each of the presentations and then have discussion. So as we flagged earlier, please keep talking in the chat if you would like to in between, or any responses or observations as we go. Okay, so we're now going to move to Anna. So Anna, if you want to share your screen. So Anna Sitnikova is an art curator, interior architect, and educator. She's a co-founder, as we've mentioned, and co-director of the Moon Gallery Foundation, which is a cultural NGO based in the Netherlands. And since 2019, Anna has been teaching on the BA Interior Architecture and MA Industrial Design programs at the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague. And as a practitioner, Anna is an interior architect and project leader, and she specialises in textile architecture, exhibition design, and spatial art installations. So, Anna, over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the introduction. I started jumping through slides directly. I will try to speak on behalf of the Moon Gallery Foundation today. And I have a little bit of a different special story, of course, in response to this theme. But first, just a few words about our organization and what we do. Moon Gallery Foundation is a cultural NGO and a space art catalyst. Space-born art is at the core of our work, and we foster questions and ideas of a shared culture for a future interplanetary humankind through residencies, educational programs, interdisciplinary spaces, and events. The foundation brings together artists, scientists, and industry to exchange knowledge and create sustainable cultural practices in space. Moon Gallery advocates for the democratization of space and aims to involve society at large in a conversation about what access to space means to humanity. And at the same time, Moon Gallery brings a cultural aspect into the space sector by integrating artistic payloads into space missions and diversifying the industry perspective on the objectives and ethics of space exploration. We see space as a public communal space, which is not an anonymous robotic village governed through technocratic ethos, but a space to shape through collective imagination that has a place in our hearts. It's not a faceless domain to just take advantage of, mine, occupy, etc., but a world to approach from a place of reciprocity, care, and love in a holistic way as we expand and inevitably fill this space. And I always like to weave in my stories some of the artworks that were submitted to us as a kind of examples. And I think it's very nice to share a little bit about the work of Eduardo Cag, who is a true agent of arts in space sector for decades. And this beautiful work that he developed for Moon Gallery, I think very well contemplates on this future where, humanity expands into the universe beyond our planet. Decades before the overview effect formulated by Frank White in 1987, Vladimir Vernadsky wrote in his book, The Biosphere, the face of the Earth viewed from celestial space presents a unique appearance different from all other heavenly bodies. The surface that separates the planet from the cosmic medium is the biosphere. And for Eduardo, to bring art to the moon is to bring a little bit of life to an inhospitable environment. This way, to extend human culture to our nearest celestial body. For Vernadsky, the noosphere, emergence of human cognition, is this kind of a succession of phases of development of the Earth after the geosphere, inanimate matter, and the biosphere, biological life. Comes the noosphere, human cognition. And Eduardo's proposal to the Moon Gallery is this cubic acrylic sculpture that you can see here, inside of which letters are engraved, forming a spatial poem titled Ad Sum, I am present in Latin. And it expresses this eventual emergence of a noosphere on the moon as a result of the establishment of a future moon village. If you like, you can find more information about this work online, and here I also share a little bit more. Artist as an agent finds ways to navigate the space industry, infiltrates it to actively plot the course, At the same time, the artist is this conscious mind that questions if this ship should fly in the first place. Moon Gallery Foundation, in our pursuit to support equitable access to space, also opens up these definitions and plays with concepts, whether it's this artist as agent or agent as artist. Artists in our community are not strictly speaking necessarily artists by profession or with academic background in arts, but rather creative practitioners across different fields. And to infiltrate the space fields, our organization chooses the path of cooperation, dialogue, co-creation with the industry, which can be criticized to produce only incremental changes and lack of activism. But on a long run, this way, we think can contribute to building a resilient infrastructure for sustainable cultural practice in space, open up the front doors for hopefully for everyone, and develop funding streams one day. We've been defining our contribution to this infrastructure since 2018 and are quite clear on the why and what, but we still cannot figure out how, or we're struggling with this question on a daily basis. To go back in time, back in 2018, when we started with a group of friends, I found myself in a very unexpected for an artist environment, ESTEC, the European Space Research and Technology Center, the European Space Agency's main technology development and the test center for spacecraft, which filled us with wonder and challenged us to artistically respond to this very strange environment. This is how this place looks like. It is in Nordwijk, just about 17 kilometers from where I am. And for about a year or two, we came back there weekly through a back door. We had many workshops, beautiful conversations with the researchers, made many friends in our age group then, which was YGT, young graduate trainees and researchers, postdoc researchers. They were also nomads or temporary visitors like us who came for about a year and then they left. Together, we spent our Friday evenings, young artists and scientists in escape bar of ESTEC, sharing beers and stories and aspirations. And one of our biggest encounters with a larger ESTEC community was when we were granted a very special opportunity to take some poster stands and use them for a pop-up exhibition in one of the busiest spots of the center, a winter garden, right in front of the cafeteria, and a special ESTEC building extension designed by Aldo van Eyck and Henny van Eyck. It is, you can see on the image, very special, beautiful building. Just part of the building. Our show was staged against the context of so-called labyrinthine clarity of the architect who introduced this non-hierarchic relationship among spaces to stimulate freedom of choice and individual space exploration. And this is how it looked like, just a very typical poster presentation. But it had a very good response from the audiences. Works presented as posters were studied very meticulously by the visitors who were accustomed to reading and unraveling all the complex concepts. And they had a lot of reactions and feedback. So we were encouraged very strongly to continue. And since then we made many exhibitions like this with the posters at different space science conferences, like, for example, Europe Planet Science Congress, EPSC. We divide our work in two major branches: space program and Earth program, which of course speak for themselves. Space program is focused on the space missions, while the Earth program is the main work that we do that fosters discourse, infrastructure, community, artistic production, interaction, and impact. And as we are named after the moon, it has always been the dream of our foundation to develop an art gallery installation on the moon, which proved to be a very challenging and risky business. And somewhere in 2021, we brainstormed and created this kind of roadmap of our space program, just of all kinds of steps that we could take before going to the moon to kind of postpone that problem that we had. So we wanted to take smaller journeys of an increasing altitude every time, starting with weather balloon, zero-G flight, rocket boosters, and etc. As you can see. And then, of course, we started mapping out all the different companies and players who could be approached for all these directions. And in the meantime, we also started to do the most obvious and the most achievable thing to do is climbing mountains, which we did quite a lot with our art. And maybe one of those examples was this year on the top of Klein Matterhorn Glacier in Zermatt, Switzerland. You can see a demo of the Illuig lander with the Moon Gallery kind of demo attached to it. And this was a spectacular one-year project, illustration of artist as agent in action, where we very strangely ended up to be a part of ESA Lab demonstrator project called Igluna and Habitat in Ice, which was organized by the Swiss Space Center and funded by the European Space Agency. The project brought together 20 teams from 9 countries collaborating to build a human habitat in ice, then demonstrating key technologies to support life in the frozen worlds. And here we came with our art installation and kind of combined also with a science experiment and also involving design university. It was a difficult construction, but we became a part of it through a university then. We had an exhibition, but at the same time also, there were lots of different interesting parts of this experiment. It was really a habitat deployed at top of the glacier in an ice palace. And this is really interesting to see the diagram that the Igluna organizers have created of what all the kind of things that they need in such a habitat, which of course doesn't feature arts or anything like that. And I would like to redraw it somehow differently, but it's not seems to be a part of consideration, of course. Then was a very important project to us when we finally went to space, which was a mission to the International Space Station. We contacted a very well-known company, Nanorox actually, who is a payload manager for many NASA payloads, and they just they also just sell payload space, and they have standard payload containers that they fly on a very regular basis to space. At the same time, they also do other things such as developing new space station, but we were only interested by this payload space, and the fact that we were looking always for a partner who we could really collaborate with, and we were lucky enough to meet Scott Rodriguez, who is an art lover and also a decision maker in a company who could really make added value for this project, where we did not just put the art in a box and launch it, but they built a beautiful system for us with a camera for observing the works while during the flight. And it was just a beautiful collaboration kind of example how it can go in a right way. There were 65 artworks included in this mission, and that spent almost a year in space, this piece, and now it's back to Earth. This is our current project called Moonbound Book, and it is scheduled to fly to the moon in late 2025, which is a, well, we all work often with the format of 1 cubic centimeter. Here it comes again, because it's very light and very tiny and very efficient for space flight. It is a kind of a CubeSat, but much smaller than that, and to contain an art piece. Here we have collected many submissions from also many of people present here today in the audience, which is very pleasant to see, answering the question, how does the moon see the Earth? And giving a sort of agency to the moon, to the celestial body, that we turn the perspective and don't, that will look the other way. This project had a very beautiful team that made it possible in a very short time. Again, it was, we dreamed to have open doors for us and make this whole infrastructure, how the mission has to happen. This time was completely not like that. It was all in a very complicated scenario, when you have a main payload and a sub-payload unit and another sub-payload unit inside it, and then you buy a tiny little space inside of another container. But I think it's still, all these practicalities, it doesn't matter in the end, because the book is beautiful and a beautiful team and a beautiful community is created around it. And I think this project will definitely continue to grow and have a beautiful impact. I think I wanted to just quickly mention this, just the new artwork that came in to our collection. The last fragment, Fenua, the last fragment by Paulina Almeida. It's just a beautiful example of how stars come together and everything to make such a project come to existence. While the country of Tuvalu is drowning under the water, the artist was trying to rescue a little piece of it, flying there and picking up a little bit of sand grains. She not just created the artwork, but she built a community around it. The University of Aveiro and the Minister of Home Affairs, Climate Change and Environment of Tuvalu, and even Tuvalu Airlines and the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, everyone had to aid the process of creating an artwork in the end, and they all will be a part of this mission when Tuvalu will be eternally on the moon. So this is kind of interesting. Yeah, every artist has a very special journey, I think, when they embark on such projects. And yes, thank you for your attention. That was it. Be happy if you would like to join our community and also join the discussion further.
Thanks, Anna. That was wonderful. Really great to see those projects together. Okay, so finally, we're going to hear from Luis, who can hopefully start sharing his slides. So, Luis Guzman, he's a Chilean artist, researcher, technologist, and curator whose work unfolds at the convergences of art, biotechnology, and aerospace technology. He has developed bioart and scientific projects on board the International Space Station and on satellites in low Earth orbit, focusing on the emergence of extraplanetary life and speculative space ecologies. Luis is the founder of Radix Lucis Studio and the co-founder of the space-based artistic laboratory, The Foundry. He also has several other affiliations, which I'm just going to go through here. So he's a permanent member of the Space and Planetary Exploration Laboratory at the Institute of Chile, a member of the Biofutures for Transplanetary Habitats Hub. He's curator of the Moon Gallery that we've just heard about. He's a pioneer at the Carmen Project. And last but not least, he's an active member of the Cultural Negotiation of Science research group, where currently he's a PhD researcher working between CNoS and the Space Interdisciplinary Research Theme group that we have at Northumbria. Okay, over to you, Luis. Thanks.
Thank you, Fiona. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's really great to meet you all here today. I'm really pleased that I have seen those amazing presentations by Nahum and Anna. It's always a pleasure to get to know more about your work. I'm always impressed about it. So yeah, today I'm going to be presenting a little bit of my work and trying to narrate how this work also is this story about kind of moving between different disciplinary cultures, which represents this form of infiltration in the sense that basically you're entering domains that are unfamiliar sometimes and learning new languages and new codes that allows you to actually become an agent in the sense that you create change and create new perspectives in terms of how things are working in that domain, but also in terms of how your own work starts to operate. So just to frame a little bit of my practice, I've been working in the intersection between art and science for a long time. I've been always interested into working with living systems and organisms basically because I was interested into moving from the idea of producing objects into the possibility of producing agents. So basically, my artworks are intended to exist in a very different ontological way compared to an inanimate object. So basically, I've been exploring these kind of relationships with the non-human through my practice for in different mediums, mostly in this kind of sculptural way, but also in multimedia. Into my multimedia practice. So basically, a cloud landscape that is displayed here at the right of the screen is a self-sustaining ecosystem that basically reflects into how can we recreate nature in times that we call the Anthropocene. So how these forms of symbiosis can be actualized in context in which there's scarcity for accessing the soil. And that happens in the gallery space, but also in the outer space. So basically, the project was a response into climate change and the built environment, but also a kind of speculative possibility or exploration into how nature could be taken with us once we leave the planet. So I was really interested into working with photosynthetic organisms, given that every animal, including humans, and photosynthetic organisms share a very deep ecological and symbiotic relationship. And this is how basically I started to infiltrate the field of space because when I was doing my master's degree, I decided to look into how these organisms are actually understood from the perspective of astrobiology. So I was doing this astrobiology course with Professor Charles Coquel when I saw the opportunity for applying to launch a project into the ISS with the MIT Space Exploration Initiative. So basically, my project was curated in that opportunity by Xin Liu, who was leading the Space Exploration Initiative at that moment, in order to be included into the Sojourner 2020 payload. This payload had a very interesting capacity, which was to simulate actually two subgravities. So it was capable of simulating lunar and Martian subgravities, and had a static level that was attached to the box. You can see here the top level in the picture at the right is just attached to the chassis of the payload. So everything that was there was subjected to a microgravity. So I was interested into exploring the possibility of space technology to produce extraterrestrial life. I was interested into the idea of mutation into space and how organisms and technology basically can be integrated into a unified system. So eventually how space technology would assist for the process of individuation of living entities into space. So I decided to take culture of marine diatoms of the genus Pheodactylum tricornutum to the lunar environment of the International Space Station. And I decided to work with these organisms because they themselves are really interesting from evolutionary perspectives, but also in terms of the ecological relationships that we establish with them as main producers of oxygen for the planet. And Pheodactylum tricornutum has this capacity of shifting between three different morphotypes. So in themselves, they are mutants, but also they are neither plants or animals. So they represent a very interesting evolutionary moment for life. So this project was launched in the 7th of March of 2020 and was hosted into the Columbus module of the International Space Station for a month. So that happened exactly or kind of very closely to the pandemic lockdown. So it was a very strange moment for me to have a project in space, but also seeing how the world was changing dramatically also because of the influence of microorganisms. So the whole kind of COVID situation also informed the project in terms of exploring the potential for this type of ecologies, given that the COVID actually colonized the world, just to use a very kind of problematic word now, through the technological means like planes and airlines. So after a month of being hosted there, I got to produce 30 generations of Pheodactylum tricornutum that were basically born under the conditions of the moon, gravitational conditions of the moon. And interestingly, these organisms presented all of the possible morphotypes, including morphotypes that were kind of in between two more defined stages. So the idea of alienation and mutation basically was central here, mostly in order to explore what is the ecological potential or what are the ecological implications of space exploration and how can we deal with these new entities. I was pretty much interested into these new ontologies that have not been really discussed from the ethical perspective or the ecological perspective. So it was really difficult for me to imagine the whole process in space, given the fact that I was allowed to integrate my project into a chamber of 1 cubic centimeter. So this idea of mutation has been something that I am currently also exploring through my practice. And I've been also using AI in order to try to visualize this process, which is very remote and hard to grasp. So these are experiments that are part of the final installation, in which I use the imagery that was produced after the return of these organisms to the Earth, and then looking to modulate this process of transformation. Well, the project was presented in several opportunities, never has been presented fully as the final installation. So there's several iterations of this artwork, both in Chile and in Spain, mostly. And from that opportunity, I started a permanent collaboration as a member of the Space and Planetary Exploration Laboratory. This collaboration also represents a form of infiltration because it's a purely scientific project called PlanSat, which was a CubeSat designed to the study of extremophile organisms in space. And this collaboration started because when I was given the chamber for integrating my project into the Sojourner project, I had to develop a different version of it that was optimized to integrate biology. Basically, the ones that were given by MIT were not totally optimal for my application. So I had to create my own. And that started the whole process of iteration and technological innovation that took me to develop a system to keep organisms exposed directly to the space environment. So this project was in collaboration with Professor Jenny Blamy, a Chilean astrobiologist. And we are still collaborating with her in a more ambitious version of the PlanSat that is going to be launched to the International Space Station later this year, to the MISI system, which is an external platform of the International Space Station. So in this opportunity, instead of having the organisms exposed to space and then deorbiting the CubeSat, we are going to have them into the ISS, also exposed directly to the space environment, but we are going to return the samples in order to understand exactly this process of transformation into the genomics of these different microorganisms. So you can see here, these are parts of the process of the project itself. So the project was launched on the 1st of April 2022 in the Transporter 4 mission, and then deployed into low Earth orbit by the Space and Planetary Exploration Laboratory. So the image at the right is actually the first photo that we got taken in space of the experiment in itself. So I'm interested into narrating this experience also because for me, the aspect of infiltrating other domains represents also the transformation of my own work. I think infiltration in this sense is a two-way kind of process in which your practice also becomes, or in my case, my practice also becomes a little bit more scientific and a little bit more contaminated as well with aspects of space engineering mostly. Currently, I'm working on a project called The Angel of History. This is a project that is conceptually anchored on a fragment of the philosophy of Walter Benjamin, who describes a painting by Paul Klee called The Angelus Novus, which depicts an angel who seems to move away from something that he is staring at. He describes that his eyes are bulging and his mouth is open and his wings are spread out. And this is how he imagined the idea of the angel of history. Basically, this is a metaphor in which Walter Benjamin explores and explodes basically the idea of Paul Klee's drawing in order to narrate this process of technological acceleration and inherent technological existential essence of humanity in a way. So basically, when he describes the angel of history, he also describes this entity that is looking back into the world and sees how the catastrophe starts to appear. And the angel wants to come back to save us from the catastrophe and to repair all of the ruin that is being produced. But the angel cannot access this moment because it's pushed away by a strong wind, by a storm. And he depicts this idea by naming this storm as what we call as progress. So basically, in this project, I try to explore this idea of the storm of progress, in which basically we are involved at the moment in a very kind of fundamental way. So the project basically asks one question, which is what would happen if the angel could see the storm of progress? Could we reveal the storm of progress by technology in itself? So the idea is that basically sorry. I'm going to use three of the most fundamental technologies of this moment that are characterizing this time in history, which is space technology and biotechnology and artificial intelligence, in order to reveal this storm of progress so the angel of history can actually access this moment in history. So by articulating these three forms of technological acceleration, I'm trying to produce a process in which this moment is revealed to us through a message. And this is done by a very kind of technical construct that has to do with flying DNA particles into space. So me and a group of collaborators from Cornell University have designed DNA molecules that have the capacity of self-assembly. And these molecules also have encoded information in them. Okay, so we encoded different words referring to the different technologies that describe the storm of progress into these molecules, and also a type of effect, whether it's positive or negative. And these molecules are also connected to different places that are undergoing certain geopolitical tensions. So by liberating these DNA molecules into the microgravity environment, they are going to be able to connect creating different possibilities that are not present on Earth, given the effects of microgravity. And by running this code, once we retrieve the DNA molecules, we are going to be able to see basically this storm of progress, because the DNA sequence is going to be read using artificial intelligence and then decoding back the originally encoded information. So yeah, that's a little bit of an overview of my practice, and hopefully we can explore a little bit further about this idea of infiltration during the second phase of this presentation and the talk. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Luis. That's great. And so interesting to have those three talks and really different perspectives of coming to this idea of the artist as agent. I think it was really one of the small kind of phrases that I picked up on was this idea of backdoors, or how a kind of confidence is produced to allow an infiltration to happen, sometimes kind of knowingly, sometimes through the back door, sometimes through the front door, but also this idea of a kind of a Trojan horsing that goes on often. And I think it's interesting picking up in the chat there that Barbara Browning was saying about this idea of should we use the word political? Is that kind of creating difficulty for our cause, which I think is something is really interesting to kind of come to. So if I can invite, yes, Nahum, Anna, Luis, you're all in the room again with your cameras on. And if you would like to respond to anything within each other's talks, any kind of resonances or not.
Well, just to start the conversation, I'm really interested into how basically we have three different perspectives, three different narrations. So how the individual practices basically modulate a different way of infiltrating or getting in contact, or different forms of synergy within the arts and the space sector. So I'm really fascinated always by one history of Nahum, in which he basically looked into a way of preparing himself and his colleagues for space flight. So I don't know if you want to share that anecdote, because I think it's very illustrative of, lateral ways of thinking and creativity in order to access this kind of pretty much closed domains as the space sector.
Yeah, well, first of all, great listening to you, Luis, and Anna, for your incredible work. I think it's like, I think later what it will be very interesting to see is like how exactly you manage to accomplish these projects, because like, especially for many young artists that want to do this type of work is like, okay, how do I start? Because there's not an open call to all of a sudden start doing this work. It's something that you start building with relationships and trial and error, no? Like finding an ally inside an organization. And in my case, I always try to have like like a plan B if things don't work out if I don't get the rocket, no, or if I don't get an access to the space agency. I try to think also like an artist, no, like not to depend in having that access to do what I think it's important to do in the work. And in this case, with the parabolic flights, matters of gravity, it was really uncertain that I was going to have the access that I wanted to the parabolic flight for for many reasons, even like because there was a war going on since then in Ukraine. It was the invasion of Crimea. So I was like, okay, I need to start, no, because also I was like pulling out the first round of funding. And I was like, okay, well, let's start preparing for this. And we were in Mexico City. I invited other artists, and it was like, where in Mexico City can we train for a space mission? And because of the lack of astronautical facilities in Mexico City, I thought, well, a fun fair, a theme park, no, Six Flags, let's do it. They have things that produce like some extra G's, like roller coasters. They have this free fall game that drops you, no, like this drop tower. So I called Six Flags and I told them, hey, like we're going to do a space mission in Russia. Can we train in Six Flags? Can you maybe open 1 hour before and let us do, the roller coaster, like 5 times non-stop and see what happens. And we started to that. It was so easy. It was the easiest residency I've ever managed because they said like, okay, that's weird. Yes, you can come. And there was literally like a guy with a master key, like switching on the games for us. And and I mean, I don't recommend it, but I think after that week of doing non-stop roller coasters, the muscle pain and the bone pain that you have, because those things vibrate a lot. It's like it was horrible. But anyways, we try to devise like little training devices, no? Like we invented, like imagine like a glass that is inside a bigger glass and it's glued to the smaller glass is glued to the bottom of the bigger glass, and it's obviously like with a lid, and we put water and then we graded the glass, and the whole point was to go on a roller coaster, like going around and making sure that you don't spill the glass. So you shift your focus instead of being like worried about the roller coaster, you're just like moving this in front of you. Of course, after the first drop, the water went in and out like 10 times, no? So, well, we were resourceful with what we had. Eventually, the Russians told me, it's going to be impossible to do what you want to do. And I was like thinking like an artist. And I was like, okay, I mean, this shouldn't be difficult. Basically, I need three things. I need a cargo plane, and like many companies in the world have cargo planes, DHL, FedEx, UPS, and they have cargo planes, no? I need a pilot, no, a military pilot, maybe retired, that would like to do this, and fuel, no, which maybe I can get the sponsorship from a petrol company. And I was calling like these companies like FedEx, like, hey, how much would you rent me one of your cargo planes for 2 days? Like I have the money. And everyone was like so puzzled, like, why do you want to do that? No? And I was calling pilots, like, hey, can you do parabolas on a FedEx airplane? And it was like, what? I'm like, yeah, I need to do this project. So at the end, it happened with the Russians, but I think the spirit of being playful while we were trying to like do the work, I think was like extremely important, because even if we wouldn't have access to the airplane at the end of the day, I think we would have had a project that achieved basically the goals, no? So well, in a nutshell, that's the the story.
It's
Um,
incredible.
it's incredible indeed. But Nahum, you've been for many years in this field, right? I don't know for how long. Exactly, but how do you feel the landscape is changing for you? Do you have more
Mm.
calls, invitations from NASA? Can you do something for
Yeah.
us or with us? Or what's changed?
Oh my God, it has changed. I have to say, I've been in this field, I don't know, 15 years or so. And I think I began when the new space was just starting. And I think that was a big change because in the past, everything was through national space agencies that they have a very specific dynamic. No, they tend to be extremely conservative because they respond to national budgets and the will of politicians. So if you were going to do something, that was a little bit more scandalous, no, then that will scare space agencies because they didn't want to upset politicians. But now that there are a lot of like new companies, then in the beginning it seemed quite interesting because these new companies, they were all about experimenting fast and I mean, like we saw it with SpaceX, no? It was just like whatever we have to do in order to do something interesting, we will do it. And they were not scared. But at some point, that initial freedom and this is when we started to see how, like, I don't know, like satellite companies had residencies for an artist, like painting the satellite or all the possibility of sending payloads, no, to the ISS, and like something that the Moon Gallery has done. I did it in one project, um, with SAS Systems and ESA and SpaceX in 2019. It was possible and it's still possible. I think, like, because the number of launches has increased. Um, but now this brings a different layer, no? That just to spice up our conversation, I am going to say, and that is like as some of these companies are are becoming quite controversial in the public domain, and I'm talking specifically about the big ones, no, like Blue Origin and everything that Bezos represents, and SpaceX and everything that Elon Musk represents in our political landscape, in our environmental landscapes. So then there is that layer, like how much, even though there are only like launchers, meaning the rockets, uh, and basically right now, like if any of us is going to send a payload, like 99% likely that it's going to be using a SpaceX rocket. So that brings that new series of concerns, no? Like, do you want to do something with these companies? Does it align with your discourses? I don't think that the answer is binary. And we have had this conversation with Luis and Anna. Like, personally, I had a beautiful and kind request to be part of the Moonbound book, and I had to reject this. Not because I don't share the spirit of the book, it's something I will always celebrate, and I will celebrate once it happens, but because I've been very vocal against SpaceX and the narratives that they are constructing about the future, and it just doesn't align with what I'm publicly saying, no? But because I've been focusing a lot in the last years in these like more critical narratives within the space sector, but yeah, it doesn't have to be the same for other people, no? And that's the beauty of this. We can have this conversation together and have different viewpoints. So, what do you think, guys?
Yes, it's really interesting because there is this paradox between the centralization of knowledge and capacity in the context of the space agencies, and then the kind of more democratization that came along with the new space environment. But then that also represents the centralization of capital and, like the distribution of ecological and political problematic issues as well that are basically, like having space debris falling over the Caribbean and affecting ecologies and communities that are way removed from the whole kind of SpaceX activities. So I guess that problematic is central at the moment. My position is that we are planting seeds for the future, really. So I'm more kind of interested into a long-term view and what artists are possibly building right now that can have a continuation over time. And then because the whole landscape, I'm pretty sure, is going to change pretty rapidly, exactly how it changed from the space agencies to the contemporary space companies. And then we are going to have more possibilities, and it's going to be a more diverse and kind of distributed landscape. So I guess that and we were also discussing this topic when we were preparing for this presentation, which is one concept that comes along with the idea of infiltration, which is the idea of infection or transmission that artists are producing within the space sector in this case. So I guess that by, for example, including an artwork or an art piece, we're not just including an object, we're including a community, we are including an open possibility. We are including different forms of social organization, and this kind of, it could be seen as a parasite, but it also could be seen as a symbiotic kind of relationship there, because basically what is going to be the evolution of what we're doing today is what interests me more, whether these alternative forms of imagination and cultural production and even social and ecological constructs are going to proliferate. And I guess that's the kind of main, it's the main tension for me. So I guess that's I'm pretty aware that the environment could be better, could be improved in terms of the different tensions that you just mentioned. And I guess that it will, because there is so much, so many reasons now actually to start having this type of conversations around space exploration. But my main thing is that we cannot just leave space exploration for others to do, like having an active participation. It is, at least from my perspective, really crucial at the moment for those reasons. What do you think, Anna? I'm also very interested, Anna, sorry, before you respond, in your perspective, because you've been also like dealing with the companies directly, and you have like a very interesting understanding of kind of these forms of integration in terms of the arts into space missions, like, for example, in the case of the Moonbound book, which is like this small, agent in a way that is integrated there.
Yes, I will answer that. I just also see in parallel there is a very interesting discussion going on in the messages, and I feel like it can also happen vocally. It's maybe interesting to welcome everyone to join the conversation who wants to, but I will answer, of course, Louis. It's very interesting what's happening. Well, I don't know, at least when last time we met at the IC last year, there was this contemporary arts, I believe, session was called, and there were many artists who specifically choose not to create space art related work in space or launch anything to space for many very valid reasons, such as, for example, the impossibility to fund such projects through public sources, which is completely understandable. And if we want to make it sustainable practice for artists, yeah, they need to have ways to operate. So our position, as I mentioned already, is different here. And we, of course, a very tiny foundation and don't have those budgets. And in many conversations that we had with the space companies, they really try to sell air for hundreds, thousands of euros. Just having no real references anymore with reality, because they just gauge how you will react by starting from naming just something, thinking, oh, well, this is just an opportunity for us, and with no effort trying to do it. Yeah, they are happy to sell air. They don't want even to put an effort or this collaboration. That's all very much in words. They will massage and try and promise things, but it's very often just superficial interest. Yeah, very much commercially driven. With the commercial companies, obviously, it's also their job to sell. It's a very different experience with the agencies, governmental agencies. I am very interested to hear from how Nahum is managing to work with them. I find that even more challenging because they're just a closed door, and yeah, in most cases to begin with. So yes, it's something we have not been successful yet. And I mentioned two examples. We did something with the European Space Agency, which were, almost without their knowledge, let's say, that we were a part of it somehow. I want just to change these things and make it more open, and that's what we're trying to do. And then artists will also be interested to join such missions more, because it will be, not everyone wants to embark on a puzzle that Nahum does. I love it personally. We really love to just fake it until we make it, and we go on with the project regardless, indeed, of we think we succeed or not. But yeah, for a more serious and artistic production, you have to make it a more of a professionalized artistic field, like a base for it. Groundwork needs to be there, I think.
I also have one question for you guys. It's basically very fundamental in terms of what is the main driver for you in order to move into space or the space sector, because it's very challenging. It's a very kind of like you need to deal with all of these different levels of complexity. So you really need to have like a very strong kind of reason for why to access the space sector and why to expand the arts into this kind of domain.
Okay, well, I can start. And also, I think eventually it would be nice to respond some of the questions that are happening in the chat. I think there's some interesting conversations there. I mean, in my case, why am I interested in space? I mean, I think the most fundamental thing for myself is that, because I am in space and I am part of it. And and then, of course, for me, what is important right now is, I think, two things. One is like the experience of existing in such strange place. And since we're like sense-making biological beings, that we need to like to storify, our worlds. I love to be part of that process, of creating new meanings and just like finding the poetry of being here in this moment and what it means. It's a very strange thing. And then secondly, when it comes to that technicality of like, having a machine that puts you in another perspective in the space that we are. I don't know. I am interested in how that specific culture that is giving birth to incredible technology, I have to say, but how there's a big cognitive dissonance with the culture that the space sector has, and I'm talking mainly about astronautics, with like with a technological development and its culture, no? Like I always say, and I keep saying it, it's incredible that we are developing the latest science and technology, in order to get close to the sun, in order to venture out of our solar system, and yet the cultural paradigm that they are using is 500 years old. So for me, it's like, whoa, okay, like someone is really not doing their homework, and I think in a good to a good extent that is us, no, like that. I mean, we're the culture experts. This is our job. This is our profession. um, People in the humanities and the arts. So for me, it's like, okay, something needs to happen. How is it possible that we are imagining, like the space sector praise themselves as to be, like the industry of the future of humanity, and yet we are imagining it with all the things and paradigms and systems that haven't worked on this planet, to bring, like to look after this planet, to be caring with each other for justice, care, etc. And so for me, that's a missed opportunity. So beyond the critique, for me, this is an opportunity, no? Like if we were to really use the opportunity of that black canvas, how can we invent new ways of coexistence, having learned from the things that we have done in the past? Because right now everything feels like copy paste, no? Like our economic model is copied and then pasted into the space economy. Extraction, copy paste, patriarchy, no? Copy paste, no? I mean, just look at any panel with all the heads of space agencies. It's just like white old men, So the space sector is not only technology, it comes with a lot of culture. And for me, it's exciting to work on that element.
I think that's so interesting, and so true that we talk about culture, that we talk about as working in a kind of cultural sector, but actually there are disciplinary cultures in all these kind of working environments, and I think that they're the things we really need to attend to as well. And thinking through this discussion, this idea of infiltration is actually a two-way thing. And I think that that's something that, we've been really interested. Been doing in my work, but then more widely with our CNoS group is this idea of how do you bring those scientists, those technologists, those engineers within the environment of arts and humanities, and kind of constructively wrong foot those people, so there's an experience that allows for a permeability that they can then take back into their own disciplinary cultures and seed that knowledge, that tolerance, that license to be open and curious, and allow other kind of cultures, because I think that, especially in kind of fundamental science, the route into that is so stripped, anyway, it is in the UK, of kind of cultural input, of any kind of cultural expression, or any kind of ability to bring your whole political self, sorry to use that word again, but to bring your whole political self to your research is really kind of limited. So I think, Nahum, you're right, there's some really interesting things coming up in the chat, and I can see some hands starting to come up. I'm hoping that Dawn has a handle on what order those hands are in, to be able to invite you into the room.
I do. There's been some fantastic chat, a fantastic dialogue within the chat. I've been kind of writing some of the notes that are happening. I know Barbara Brownie's concerns around language have been addressed, but then she was bringing in some really interesting conversation around exclusion. So I don't know if Barbara, you wanted us to start us there, and then I see Lisa, your hand is up, and then Nikita, who is also bringing in some really interesting things in the chat, as was Yana. So Barbara, did you want to begin as you began that off in the chat?
I mean, I'm happy. Yeah, I'll pass over to Lisa in a minute, but yeah, just a couple of those things. Speaking as an artist who's presented at space sector conferences, we have to bring people over in their terms in language, using language they understand, even if we understand that language differently, because we don't want to scare them off or intimidate them, starting from a point where they just look at us and go, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not engaged in going on here. So we need to start where they are and bring them slowly over to our side. And it's always very polarizing when I speak at space sector conferences. And there are some people in the space sector who think, wow, this is really interesting. Then there's other things to overcome, but at least that part of the audience is always receptive to then extending the conversation a bit. But then there's also the other half of the room that just don't get it at all, and who ask questions like, where's the data? Because they want some kind of, like, they think in terms of numbers and hard evidence, and they want this kind of quantitative evidence that the arts matter. And even when I feel like I've just spent that last half hour kind of presenting to them data, I'm thinking in terms of qualitative data, they're thinking in terms of quantitative data. And part of me thinks that people in the space sector who are approaching it like that, it's almost impossible. There's almost no point in even having that conversation. And it's the people who are excited, don't know enough, but then are excited and are happy to engage in a further conversation. Those are the people who we need to win over, because they're open-minded. And then through them, maybe that's a backdoor into those other conversations with those other people who don't immediately see the value of it. It's just about finding the right people in that audiences, and they are there. I mean, it's a mixed bag, but you've got to use that right language for them to be able to access it.
But also we need to expand our language, and I think that's a very interesting part of actually creating the bridge between disciplines, is that by infiltration is a very kind of proactive thing, because you need to actually modulate yourself into a technoscientific way, so you can start building something in common, and then once this bridge is built, you can have a kind of different form of conversation there.
Yeah.
But I think that that's the possibility of the arts, is that basically you can make whatever you want from it. It's an open kind of system rather than a methodological approach to reality. So
yeah.
And I think if you start, with words like research, they understand the word research. We understand the word research differently. And as soon as you start talking, you realize we mean two different things. I mean, we often mean something that's much more experiential, and we learn through doing. We start research with an open-ended question rather than with a concrete hypothesis, but we still use the word research. And if we go into the conversation both using the word research, it feels initially like we've got common ground. It then becomes clear in that conversation we're using the word differently, but at least we've started the conversation.
You know, and I mean, and sometimes I think it's simpler than that. Like when I was teaching in ISU, the Space University, I sometimes would start my class asking, okay, what triggered your interest in space? And in most cases, they will go, they will remember a cultural product that, like no one is going to say, oh yeah, I was 5 years old and I was obsessed with atmospheric drag and correcting orbit paths for satellites. Like, no, it always goes back to Star Trek or Jules Verne or David Bowie. That's very common in some generations. And it's like, exactly, like art is important, right? For space, because it starts, a lot of the things start in the arts. Or just my 2 cents.
Did anyone else want to come in on that? I know Ulrike is saying a lot of points in the chat around translation, and I know Helen, you've had a lot in the dialogue. I don't know if we want to ask in order of hands raised or in order of the conversation flowing. I see Helen is really eager, and you were feeding in
I
quite.
am really eager because there's business of language. Sorry, I've jumped in ahead of some other people, but you should have fed us in, really. However, I'm just going to say the thing about language, the language of how this was advertised. Lots of you are in academia. Why, I don't even understand your language. I'm an artist. I'm not in academia. I do massive amounts of research. The language that you use is inaccessible. It is unnecessary. You might find it necessary if you're going to have that conversation between yourselves. But if you're going to have a conversation outside art academia, and I say art academia, you really have to use a different language. I mean, what's the point of using a language that you can't understand? I mean, my profession is to talk to thousands and thousands of people annually. I can't use a language either to non-professionals or children, which I work with, or professionals in other disciplines, specialists. I can't use some very kind of bizarre language. So I don't understand the language that some of you have used within this Zoom and the language that you use to advertise it. I don't know why it was described like that. So how are you ever going to talk to loads of other people if you use these complicated and unnecessary words? That'll be it for me.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Helen. And I know you were bringing lots of thoughts in around collaboration and language. So thank you for that. Did any of the participants want to engage?
Yeah, I'd quite like to just say a quick word. This discussion about language is really, really important. And I think it's important when we are talking to scientists, and the way, if we want to work alongside them, which is our only way into that industry, is we do have to have legible conversations with them. And I think something Naomi mentioned, and maybe others too, is that scientists are also humans, and they often come to space science from the same place we have, which is, something happened to them as a child, or they knew somebody, or they saw an astral event or anything like that. Or, it was Star Trek or something. But the important thing is to tap into that curiosity and to show your enthusiasm for your mission. You're interested in this sector too. You're connected. You're making a mission for yourself. And that's all coming from this deep curiosity that you're working on and trying to understand, etc. And the thing that might attract them the most is that I think scientists also feel a bit ignored in some ways, because they're this sort of round of having to produce papers and research, etc. It's quite difficult. But when you're actually appealing to their childlike curiosity with your own childlike curiosity, I think they tend to open up, and then they can see that you bring a lot with you. So you bring the rest of humanity is lining up behind you, because you're reacting as a human to what's going on, and you have another audience, and they really would like to be connected to that audience as well. It's very difficult to break through. I mean, I'm trying to work on a project now, and it's stalling, and I'm having to sort of keep myself going in some way and thinking, okay, well, how can I make this appealing and interesting for them to want to be involved in it? But it is, and I think we all sitting here have some sort of mission to do this, and it's important that we continue. And some of us will have failures or great outcomes, but it's important to keep those conversations going. And the more they see this stuff out in the public, like the Moon Gallery projects, the right people will eventually sort of stumble across this stuff, and they will start to ask more questions. So we have to be more like, what can I say, like a movement. You have to keep talking and sharing and approaching people, etc. And even if we are not entirely successful, we're actually being successful for humanity, because we're making those steps, because we're connecting, trying to connect people. So I'll be done there.
Thank you, Lisa. Did Louise or Fiona, Nahum or Anna want to speak to any of those thoughts before we bring in more comments next from Anika and then Jana?
Yes, just on the topic of language, I wanted to add a little example from our experience. In our times as tech, I met this astrophysicist who brought a beautiful artifact from his time in Antarctica, which was the purest, the cleanest air on Earth that he collected in a little bottle. And he wanted to submit it to our project as a kind of perfect puzzle piece to start anew on the moon. And we found it so beautiful. We did never think about it, where to find this cleanest air. And naturally, he really struggled to actually make a written proposal in an artistic language. And we sat down together writing up his story. And that was really beautiful how this collaboration naturally had to happen, because he had his piece, but then he needed, I really like that we need each other in the end to make it complete.
Mm-hmm.
I would to add something briefly in terms of language and accessibility or inaccessibility that has to do also with the fundamental reason of why actually expanding human culture into space. And I guess that language is this when it's in the context of fundamental science and technology, might get obscure. That's something that happens when you kind of enter into very specific domains. But ultimately, the fundamental question is of why taking art into space is actually for the same reason of expanding language. We cannot assume that reality might explain itself only in terms of logic and math and figuration and grammar. There might be things that are beyond the possibilities of the symbolic systems that we use. So what's the role of the arts there? Is not to respond to predetermined questions. It's actually to open up the possibilities beyond of what we know and the ways that we use to know what we know. So I guess that, Jana is raising her.
It's very anxious.
Hello,
Yeah.
Jana.
Welcome in, Jana.
Yeah. Thank you very much, first of all, for this discussion. I am from space sector. Science speaking, I have PhD in physics. I did my postdoc at NASA. I worked all my life in space sector. And I attended multiple space conferences. So I worked in academia, in private sector, in 3 different countries. So what we are talking in the conference is a very practical talk now. We are talking about politics, and we are talking about politics and more about politics. In Europe, we talk about competition with the US and competition within Europe in different countries. We talk about geo-return. We talk about money. We talk about investment. We talk about all economy of space. In the US, we talk about competition with China. We talk about public-private partnership. We talk about investments again and investments. New space is all about a commercial space. So there is no space for culture in space sector. And actually, nobody knows about all these beautiful artistic projects. I know because I'm very much interested in arts. I have also a degree in art history. And I learned since last year, I learned a lot. So I learned from Nahum, from Louise, from Moon Gallery. But nobody, when I talk to my colleagues, nobody knows about Moon Gallery. If we talk about, everybody knew the moon lander Firefly. If you open the Wikipedia page, you will see this payload, all instruments will be there. Does anyone know that there was this pyramid on the moon? No. I tell you more. Nobody even knows about Jeff Koons, this intuitive machines, these moon phases. Even more. Not so many scientists know who is Jeff Koons, the most paid living artist. And we're talking about let's go infiltrate to conferences, artists, and we start talking and challenging scientists and some functionaries. Who's going to pay like say 500 euros to attend some conference just to ask a question? I tried, but I tried to submit talks, say like very practical things that engaging with arts would help innovate better. It's very good to engage with arts in order to boost innovation, scientific innovation, engineering innovation, business innovation. Very practical things. Very you can see ROI on that. Even that was not accepted. So this is very challenging. As Lisa said, I agree. It's super hard, even from people from the same environment, from the same ecosystem as me, to talk to my colleagues. I speak their language. I'm from tech world, and that is very challenging. And I think here there should be like one step before talking serious topics. It's education. This is like I feel my personal mission, like educate these tech people with arts as I can, So education and such discussions, such talks are very important. So, and I try to disseminate this information among my colleagues. But yeah, that is hard, and it's pity that Priyanka left. She's also doing similar things. She's also PhD in physics and an artist. I'm not artist, but yes. So this is what I wanted to say. Like it's not very easy, but it must be done.
It's interesting how, for example, in the context of the ISS reports, there's no mention to any artistic projects.
Oh, we had actually a very good it was a live stream of what was going on the NG-17 rocket as it was launching, and our project was mentioned there. Wow, unbelievable! It were just some seconds, and they feed us in and talking, even trying to interpret some individual works of art. But it was kind of a wrong interpretation, but still so satisfying that they acknowledge the presence of so many payloads in this rocket. Just this one thing that was highlighted then.
I think
Can I
Ankita.
come in with quite a pertinent example? There was a Japanese artist who did a project called Spinning Top, and it was an art piece sent to the ISS made by an artist. And I was looking for images of this. Japan acknowledges this is an artwork. In the NASA database, the word art is not a keyword for it. It is described as a science project. And you can only find it if you search for science experiments. The word art is not in any way associated with the images and with the experiment as described in the NASA archives. So there is a conscious erasure of the word art in association with stuff that is intended as art. So it may be that some of these things are being acknowledged, but they're being kind of represented in a way that erases the fact that they are artworks.
Thank you, Barbara. And I know Ankita has been waiting very patiently, one of the first hands up, and just coming in now. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts and questions.
Oh, well, hi. Thanks for this discussion. It's really interesting. And to speak about the differences in language between scientists and artists, and, sort of like getting scientists to understand where the other group is coming from. I think it might be harder recently because of the lack of funding, given the situation in the American politics. And every single day when I open LinkedIn, someone from NASA is resigning or they're leaving their jobs. So I feel it's going to be harder to get them to see a different perspective, especially when their own funding is on the line, especially when they like the Venus project I'm working on. We still don't know whether we're going to fly in the next decade or not. And secondly, I attended a very interesting conference a few months ago here in Berlin, which was about scientists and artists and philosophers coming together. So a lot of these conversations about differences in language and how different groups of academics see things differently were all brought into light. And I want to throw this question out to the people over here as to what they think about the overview effect. There was a debate at this conference whether or not the overview effect is real. And if it is real, if Jeff Bezos has gone into space and it has experienced the overview effect, what makes him such a terrible human being on Earth, right? So yeah, feel free to take the discussion forward.
I would love to answer the last bit, Ankita. I think it will be healthy to stop believing that going to space is going to magically make people good, for no reason. I know someone. He's a German theologist. And he's been researching for many, many years if the overview effect is real. So he's been he hasn't published this research, so I will not say much about the things that I know. But basically, the pattern is very simple. Only the American astronauts say that they have experienced it, but when you speak to other astronauts from other countries, no, not really. So it seems to be kind of a cultural construction of Americans, as far as the research is going.
Thanks, Nahum. I'm very conscious of time, but Ulrika, you've had your hand up, so please step in and take the last minute.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sorry it comes in so late, but I feel compelled to speak after hearing Jana's passionate speech as well, because like her, I sit between the fields and spend a lot of my time trying to understand how to come together, or why and when. And Jana, you mentioned the words personal mission to educate the other, and I did put that in the chat, that to highlight that this is a personal endeavor that takes a lot of energy and passion. And if you find a person on the other side, or a hybrid that has this kind of passion, I just encourage you to go for it, because we know from the research on collaborative research that forced or artificial collaborations rarely thrive. And so having all of our passions in there, it might take energy, but it's also extremely important, because that means that you do invest the time that it takes to learn the other language, or to make the effort of translating for yourself and for the others, and to educate yourself across the domain, and also your peers or the others. So I actually now get more invited to speak about art science by astronomy colleagues than to speak about astronomy, which I'm, and a researcher in. So my feeling is that after speaking about it and doing this for 10, 15 years, people are not finally, but people are interested. Word gets out, and there's lots of requests from colleagues at universities. So this is not space industry, but universities of astronomy and astrophysics research, to say, can you spend half of your time speaking about art and art science? And there's a lot of interest. And there are a lot of people that say, why would I care? What's the point? What's the value of it? Give me the quantitative data of why I should care. What's the benefits? How do we protect our students from getting distracted with art? So there's all of that, but there is a change in landscape that I see, And I think that we all see that. All right, time's up for that minute.
Thanks, Ulrika. That was a really great and positive note to finish on. I too sort of see a lot of signs of hope, particularly when working with younger researchers and postdocs, etc. And I think this idea of bringing their whole self to their research is much more kind of legible to them, much more credible, and a feeling of necessity in it. So I think it's been a fantastic discussion. I want to really thank Anna and Nahum and Luis for conceptualizing this event and inviting the speakers here. It's been so interesting, and I think it really just underlines the necessity to build critical mass and to keep these kind of connections between the different locus of work that's being done, including work that is being done with people like Helen, who is not sitting inside academic institutions. I think there's room for all that. I take on board what you're saying about language, Helen. And I think there's been some response to that in the chat, that there are different languages used in different contexts. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. I hope everybody got to talk who wanted to, and it's been a really interesting chat here. As I say, this has been recorded, so we will share it. So please let other people know who would have liked to have been here and weren't able to be. So thanks very much again to our speakers. Thank you for Dawn for your care with the facilitation, really appreciated. And we'll see everybody in another space soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Really great to see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.